Hello. I am here today with Jennifer Carolan and Wayee Chu, co-founders and general partners at Reach Capital. Today is a really exciting day because Reach is announcing the close of their newest fund, Reach Fund 5, which I'm super excited to dig into, and all that it means for the evolution of the firm and the evolution of the education, learning, work, and health spaces. But before we do that, I want to learn more about the origins of the firm. You guys have been working on solving some of these really important problems in health, learning, and work for the better part of like 15 years. I'd like to sort of go on that journey with you for a little bit, just so folks have an understanding of the context in which this fund came about. So maybe Jennifer, could you start off just telling where the firm came from and what
Sure.
those first couple of funds looked like?
I actually just looked this up. We met in 2006. Did you know that? At
Yeah.
schools. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Next to each other.
Yeah.
Close.
Yeah.
Cubicle.
So we met when we were both working at New Schools Venture Fund. It is a venture philanthropy fund that was founded by Kim Smith, John Doerr, Brooke Byers. And I met Wayee on the first day, and we sat in this little cubicle area and we began collaborating, from day one. And we worked together on a seed fund, an incubator, lots of different ed tech investments. And that's where we got our start and how our collaboration partnership began. And then we hired Chantel, and then we added Esteban, and we were investing in ed tech solutions there. We worked there for 10 years. And then we spun out and formed a seed fund, New School Seed Fund, which then became Reach Capital.
And what was like, can you just remind us what the education world was like in that 2010 to 2015 period, which is, I think, was formative for your team and I think a lot of other teams in the ed tech space, including many of your investments.
Yeah, it was the charter school movement was just starting to get traction.
Yeah.
The Gates Foundation was very much behind that movement. Ed tech was very early on, mainly came through the CIOs of the districts, but this was also the time of the iPad, the iPhone, the App Store, and this really exciting revolution of mobile that allowed you to then deliver education technology through the mobile devices straight to teachers. So it could kind of go bottoms up. You also had some top down. The cost of hardware was going down rapidly. So it was a really exciting time, actually.
And I think, what really brought us together in the early 2000s was, none of us are from the Bay. We definitely all came from very different public school paths and experiences from across the country and even internationally. And so the mission around entrepreneurship, education, and change really brought us together. And you kind of drink that Kool-Aid when you come to the Valley to really understand the power of entrepreneurship as kind of a change agent in the domain. And I think that's kind of the glue and consistent mission that has brought us together and has stuck with us. And at New Schools, those were the early days of kind of EdTech 1.0, around a whole developer community starting to build really on the Apple platform at the time, which really ignited our excitement to support these founders.
Yeah, it was like, I remember we went on this kind of tour around the country where we would have dinners with EdTech founders, and we'd go to different cities like Seattle. I think we went to Detroit, New York, and we would try to get 25 founders around the table. And these were like really hardy, early pioneers of the EdTech entrepreneurship. And it was, I mean, some of them are still around, like Sam from Class Dojo.
I just talked to him last week.
Yeah. So it was fun times.
It was.
I think I started my career at a publisher at Cengage, and it's sort of funny reflecting on that period now and even at that time in like 2016 to 2019 was so focused on like getting books through the bookstore to teachers.
Yeah.
And Cengage evolved while I was there, and I got to see some of that specifically. But I think one of the coolest parts of watching like Reach's portfolio evolve is all the different like types of business models that emerged. And I think Sam's a good example of like, fundamentally had nothing to do with the traditional sales channels.
Yeah.
And I think there were a bunch of those types of models that emerged in, again, that like 2010 to 2017 period that enabled a lot of what we're seeing today.
Yes.
So I'd be curious just to hear about some of the other like sort of standout moments. You talked about the development of the App Store, but other standout moments that you think really set the table for what's happening today.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other big one that I remember was AngelList. Remember when AngelList got started, and it sort of democratized angel investing, and so these people that were passionate about education could invest directly through AngelList into edtech companies. So, like some of our early investments, Wayee and I spent a lot of time just having coffee with these AngelList investors and getting them to write $10,000-$20,000 checks. And these rounds were like 50 investors, like small checks. So it was really kind of piecing this early money that was around, that was aggregated through AngelList, that I think was also a big game changer.
Well, I think to the point on the investor side, there was this kind of consumer-driven empowerment of individuals being able to start investing in. And to be honest, the big institutions weren't interested in tech, so we were had all the incentive in the world to educate individual investors around supporting our founders. But yes, to your point, we did ride through that kind of bottoms-up, top-down business model that was such a success for our Fund 1 and 2 companies, Nearpod, Newzilla, empower the teacher first, let them drive what is best for themselves and what they want to teach and the tools they want to use, get enough users within a district or school and go top-down. And that was a very successful business model.
Yeah. And I think as a precursor to a lot of the policy level change that's happening today of like, I don't think you'd see all of the discussion around choice if you hadn't seen what a teacher could do given the right tools. Yeah. So I think like that part of the story is probably under discussed.
Yes.
Right. Well, and I do want to highlight our team, well, not myself, are made up of former K-12 educators. And so being able to see around the corner on what empowerment of what it looks like to support educators from the bottoms up was definitely, I feel, a secret sauce in that we always had the perspective from an educator when we were meeting founders.
Yeah. So in a lot of ways, our fund was born out of our own experiences as teachers, where we didn't have access to the content, the tools, the different services. And so, I mean, I've paid out of pocket, I remember, for electronic grade books. It's really dating me, but that, like, we wanted access to those types of cutting edge tools. And so many of us understood the workflows and understood the needs of the teachers. And so we wanted to get these tools into the hands of as many teachers as possible.
And the learning quality. Jennifer and other educator investors on our team could look at pedagogy and could, take a strong point of view on what quality looked like as well, which I think was a huge differentiator for us in looking at these tools.
Yeah. And today, those teachers are still on the team. And we still care a lot about pedagogy and a lot about quality. And we're looking outside of the K-12 domain as well, but we can still train our mindset and our thinking and quality bar for what does learning look like for pharmacy techs and nurses and others in the field, that because the principles are still the same for what does excellent learning look like, whether that's English as a second language or a pharmacy tech curriculum.
Yeah, well, and I think what's so hard about evaluating learning in general, and I imagine trying to raise a fund to support learning, is there's still a lot of when you see it type of evaluation. Like learning science is like so frustrating to me in that like there's so much we don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, I can feel in my bones like, this lesson or this instructor is like good, but it's so hard for me to articulate why.
Yes. Yeah, that's such a good point, because like in healthcare, for example, like it's very quantifiable, like what you're looking at lifespan, longevity. But in education, we have different concepts of what those outcomes ought to be. But even so, you can still look at engagement and retention and learning on standardized assessments and things like that.
I'm curious, you mentioned from that you were doing a lot of work with like AngelList type investors in the earlier days. I imagine there's still some of that going on. And I think one of the sort of entertaining parts of education today is you do still have a lot of grassroots interest in investing and supporting the community. But I also imagine that the investor community and the LPs that are involved with your fund have gotten a lot more sophisticated. Could you talk a little bit about what the process of raising this fund looked like, and maybe some of the like core questions that just kept coming up in your fund meetings of like, why an LP's interested in the space, why they wanted to invest with you as sort of stewards of their capital for both returns and for impact?
Yeah, I can give just a high level on, we started raising the fund mid-January. We closed it out in June, so it was a pretty efficient process. Yeah. We were really lucky to have a lot of our existing investors that have been with us since our very first fund are still with us.
Amazing.
5 funds later. Yeah, it's been amazing. And our team is very inspired and motivated by our investors, which range from large nonprofits to university endowments to financial first investors to religious order, public garden. Like we have like a diverse set of investors. And I think it speaks to how important it is that cutting edge frontier technology get into the hands of the places that matter, like learning and health and how we are training the next generation of our workforce and all of these things. Like people want to see that great tools, great technology is in all corners of our lives and in the kind of places that really matter.
I want to dig on that specifically because that's, I think, core to, I think this was true of Reach 4, but even more so with Reach 5 of it's not just about curriculum. It's not just even about classroom. It's about, learning, health, and work and the intersection of all of them. So maybe even walk us through like a specific investment that's like, sort of a canonical Reach 5 investment of like, this is where we want to be. And this is where we think the learning space has evolved into.
Well, maybe as a start for those less familiar with our other investment areas, as Fund 1 was definitely primarily focused in education. But we started to look at what we called learning enablers, kind of those solutions that were not core instruction in the classroom, but would be very impactful for any learner. From school lunch to physical health to nutrition. We looked at school transportation. If you can't get to school, there will be no learning to be had. And so we've really expanded on our learning enablers, which brought us into areas such as mental health. In addition, Handshake was a real bridge for us from going to higher ed to career readiness.
Sure.
And we built out a thesis area around work integrated learning from college to early career. And so it's been a very natural evolution, going into new fields such as mental health, healthcare. And now when we define the future of work, what really reskilling, retraining looks like both for knowledge workers, as well as we have a whole frontline worker thesis, but how do we empower small business and support? So just to set the stage on how we've expanded our investment areas. So for us, for Fund 5 is actually just an evolution of what we've been doing across these 3 areas. And technically, you can argue, ChatGPT is the largest learning platform in the world. We're all using it in the flow of our work, whether to learn or to further our own careers.
Yeah, we should spend some time on that because I think it is something I honestly am still struggling with as like an analyst of the space of like,
Yeah.
you know, does anything matter if chat is just like right there? It is core to my daily workflows. It's, students are using it constantly, whether they should be or not. I think we probably should debate, but like what does still matter if assuming chat is still there or Claude or whoever you want to, whatever your tool of choice, like what still matters? What is worth continuing to invest in?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways to think about that, but one of the lenses that we have always looked at Reach is through the social and human lens.
Sure.
And we fundamentally believe that learning is a social endeavor.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research behind that we are differently motivated in the presence of humans. And that's why, like a lot of the early research around the chatbots, and, Sal Khan has said this himself, that it was sort of a non-event for students, is that we're motivated in different ways when we're with each other. And I think that, we have a lot of growth to do around where the models are in terms of learning. Like it's moving quickly, and the AI tutors, it's a very exciting space, but there's still, you're interfacing, it's not multimodal yet. So, that's one of the things that I think we think a lot about.
Yeah.
And we don't, I think we've, used tech, whether it's AI or, it was all about cloud-based solutions in 2016, has always been an enabler to further human connection or learning for us. As examples of, as we look at AI solutions for small businesses, small business owners, we have a company called Sierra that is currently serving small to medium-sized security firms. These small businesses did not have access to an HR, CFO, department in the past, or could build it out, and now have really empowered their businesses to expand. And so we can, we have a lot of tech-enabled services in the healthcare area where the administrative work is being used. AI is helping support the administrative work, so more time can be spent with patients, with in-person training. So we're very cognizant of the impact of the solutions that we're investing in on furthering that human connection or learning.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to what I said earlier about like making sure that this incredible new technology is also in the hands of the security guard business and the teachers and the nurses and the people that are caring for our sick and most vulnerable. So we want, and in that way, I think it's very similar to how we got started. Like we were seeing all this great technology on shopping and banking, and we wanted that in the hands of teachers, which have an incredibly important job, a very complex job. And we're still sort of on that mission to see how can we get these great tools into the hands of everybody that needs and wants it.
Yeah, I think one of my like sort of pet projects this year is there's so much emphasis on job displacement from AI. And that's the headlines, I think, are probably 5 or 8 or 10 to 1 of like people losing their jobs to AI. And to be clear, I think that's really important. And like it is a real effect. Yeah. Like I get that. And I'm glad some folks are watching that. But to me, like what's way more interesting are all these emergent classes of worker and like things that you could do as a small business owner, from security firms to, healthcare aides to like, even I'm sure like shops on Main Street, that like were like fundamentally dysfunctional. My wife and I have a running joke about like, a cat, you can tell how successful a cafe will do based on the lack of volume on their menu. And like the fewer things they serve, they're more likely to succeed. And our favorite cafe ever was like, they served hot coffee and waffles. Like that was it. You could have, like, and they're still in business, like more than 10 years later. And there are fewer cafes where you can say that these days. So I really appreciate this emphasis on the emergent worker class, and like enabling them to do things either newly or in a different way than they could before.
Yeah.
Right. What I'd add is, particularly in K-12, our solutions are serving areas where there's a lack of resource of human component. For example, Advero is looking to help support school districts around their energy management. When we went deep into understanding the challenge of one facilities manager across a school site of 7 or 8 schools, I mean, they are begging for greater support in managing, in this case, energy across these 7 sites. And so these have been areas. A second example, the phone, you may be following the phone ban across state by state. Patrick at Doorman is building a phone management system that isn't, just pouches and creating more administrative
Less
work.
binary.
Yes. He's trying to meet the students and teachers where they're at in reducing social media distractions during the class time, but not fully removing the phone, as many parents actually still prefer to have, from a safety perspective, want to have their kids to have their phone. So we're just finding these pockets and areas where AI technology can be really highly leveraged to support administrators in their school day and educate.
That's, I think, the phone ban, of course, because I think it is very top of mind, but I love the facilities, example, because it's a place like people just forget about, right? And we look at our school buildings, across the country, and a lot of them were built in like the 1950s.
Yeah.
They're post, World War II buildings that are a disaster environmentally.
And our kids are spending 6 to 8 hours in these buildings. They're really important.
Yeah, there's no airflow.
Yeah.
That's why they're falling asleep in the afternoon.
These are public dollars that are going into a lot of energy waste because of these legacy systems.
Yeah. I want to continue on this theme of things that we may not even be thinking about yet. I think, like I said before, I think you guys were ahead of the trend on saying you need to treat the whole learner, rather than just the academic part of them. As you think about the next 3 to 5 years, you're starting to deploy the fund now. What are some of the areas that you're either early in your investment period or haven't even found the right company yet, but are super interested in?
Well, on this point about us being early, I do think educators always felt like that, but the funding community had not. Really.
Yeah.
And so few people in both philanthropy and venture capital had deep backgrounds in practice.
Sure.
And that's what I do think that's been a differentiator of Reach, is that we have team members that have been working in schools and universities and starting education companies and that sort of thing. So I think they always saw as holistic, but the investment community, because I remember when we got started in Reach early on, some investors were like, teachers that are trying to invest. And we thought, well, that's the best type of archetype. If you're going to be investing in education, shouldn't you have people that have that experience? So I just think that educators have always understood that. But as far as new areas, I don't know if you want to talk about Scout. I've got a few too.
Oh, I'll actually come back to Scout, but I was thinking in the healthcare areas, our colleagues Joe Myra and Quiva are going deep on pediatrics.
Sure.
And as we think about pediatric nutrition, obesity, the family as a health unit, we are going deeper on specific verticals within physical health. I have touched lightly on the areas of youth sports. We do have a sports tech wedge supporting higher ed in this new era. If you're following
which
NIL, we have 2 companies. We have we have 2 companies named Scout, but Scout in the sports world is providing financial literacy to collegiate athletes in this new era of NIL. Now that collegiate athletes can be paid, and Dropback is supporting athletic directors and departments on managing this whole, whether we love it or not, it is a whole new
big
world.
Business.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so both very mission driven founders, very focused in empowering the administrators and or scholar athletes. Jennifer was referring to a company. Scout Education is really looking to disrupt the SIS space. We don't need to maybe go into the legacy systems running so much of the compliance and administrative.
Suffice to say, they're old.
Yes. Yes. And this team has been working at immense product velocity, but have what we always look for, founders who are very committed to the user. And their first wedge are either online virtual charter schools and solving a huge compliance headache here in California. But they're an incredibly talented team and really put the user and customer first and foremost. So, again, looking at solutions outside of pure instructional classroom tools, which is also very important to us. And we have a whole portfolio in that area.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, as a former college athlete, thank you for trying to
What sport?
soccer.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you for trying to help clean up that world. And second, and maybe a good note to end on, Jennifer, you guys just had an exit in GPT-0. One of the things I found most interesting about that exit was, as far as I remember, they only had like 30 employees, but we're doing somewhere on the order of like 30 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that was announced. So, and I think what struck me about that is, one, awesome exit, like congrats to everybody involved. But two, like this concept of building a company, and they were founded in 2023, and scaling it at a velocity that is sort of hard to comprehend if you imagine like pre-ChatGPT mindset. And you just mentioned it a little bit there with Scout of like their build velocity. It sounds like it's just fundamentally faster than like what we could expect before. So I think I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. You see way more companies than I do, of like, if you've seen a change in the trajectories of the companies that you're now investing in, and whether that's keeping headcount low or just building at a rate that you couldn't possibly have expected before.
Yeah.
And how that's informing the deployment of Fund 5.
Yeah, both are true. We're seeing definitely smaller, tighter in-person teams. I think almost all of the new investments we've made in the last 2 years have been in person too, which is different. They're able to move and build much quicker and able to test their ideas much faster. So we used to talk about like an MVP. Well, they have the prototypes are ready so quickly that they're able to get those out and test them, which I think is creating higher quality products too. So that's definitely happening.
We just had an AMA Ask Me Anything, founder to founder, primarily with our more AI native teams.
Sure.
So earlier stage, but the theme was on sales velocity.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right that they're moving much faster on much smaller teams. And a big topic of conversation was actually starting with engineering being the new inside sales. They're deploying their engineers as their customer success person, as front facing, because the feedback loop, if you're an engineer that can communicate with the user well, the feedback loop to build product is much faster. So we're actually starting to see sales come organically out of engineering. And yes, partly driven by all these AI agents and tools in which they can move much faster. So that is an interesting shift as well.
And just to put a finer point on it, like how does that change your role as an investor?
Some things have changed fundamentally, like seed rounds are, 10 years ago, they would not usually have been monetizing yet.
Sure.
But most of ours was seed because you can build and get your product out there so quickly that they're monetizing much quicker. And you can call customers and we do a lot of reference checks and kind of customer feedback when we're doing diligence. So that part has changed. So the companies are kind of further along by the time that we're investing at the earliest stages. We still do a lot of recruiting for our companies, like a lot of recruiting. That's a big, we're having a in-person recruitment fair in September here.
Cool.
I feel like that even has become more important role for us.
Yeah. Because those early hires are like that much.
Yes, exactly. And you know this, of course, but the companies are looking for experience. They're looking for what have you done, and not so much, where did you graduate from or what was your major?
Yeah.
And then the other point I was going to make too is around how the consumer element of both education and health has changed. So the institutions, both in healthcare and education, have, I don't want to say weakened, but they're undergoing shifts and change.
Correct.
And with the onset of EFTC and ESAs, the dollars are flowing in different ways across the system. And that has created, and I think that Reach, and that this goes back to our background in New Schools Venture Fund, where we were investing in charter schools. We've always thought about that element of personalization and education alternatives. And that piece is still alive and well in our thesis, and even more important because of ESAs and the EFTC. So that allows companies to grow and move more quickly, I think, in those domains. And that's what we're definitely seeing. We have a company called Pathfinder, operating in Arizona that I think is addressing the ESA sector, and just like looking at the needs of these parents that are homeschooling or microschooling their children and getting access to those dollars and getting reimbursements. Like there's a whole like infrastructure that needs to happen around that.
Yeah. I think I firmly believe in this sort of era of like personal agency and taking control of, whether it's school or health. Like I just self-diagnosed with the help of a doctor, after a certain amount of ChatGPT research with exercise-induced asthma. And like the ability to go back and forth with a fairly competent ChatGPT allowed me to have a much more, complex conversation with my doctor about like, what is going on? Like, are there different treatment options? That type of thing. And I think that's happening everywhere. And it comes back to the roots you're talking about of like, give the individual agency and
data and tools.
And let them make good decisions. Like, I think is really important.
Yeah. That's such a great example because you still wanted to consult with your doctor.
100%.
And so we're still wanting to have a teacher and consult with our teachers and our doctors. But now we have more tools and data available to have, I think, going to have better outcomes in a lot of ways and quicker outcomes that might have taken you
months,
much longer
years
to diagnose.
Totally.
No, I think the agency, and we often talk about when you're building for great products, giving capability to people, whether it's a student, an educator, or a frontline worker, is so important. And that is always kind of the end goal of when we're diligencing a founder, and we've looked for mission, founder market fit, mission-driven founders, that obsession to build empowerment. It always comes back to that piece. In how we find the best founders.
Jennifer and Wayee, you've given me so much of your time. Thank you. I'm so excited for the new fund. I'm going to be following it closely. I can't wait to write about hopefully the whole fund's worth of investments, but especially these first few. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for your interest.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for making the time.